It's 7:15 p.m., January 19th, 1931. Picture this. We're inside a smoky, dimly lit chess club right in the heart of Liverpool, England. Suddenly, a phone rings. The club captain picks it up, listens, and takes down a very specific message. Message for William Wallace from R.M. Qualtrough, 25 Menlove Gardens East, tomorrow evening. Now, this was supposedly some sort of business opportunity, so when the message is handed to William Wallace, who was this notoriously quiet, incredibly methodical man deep in the middle of a chess match, he just jots the address down. You know, he had absolutely no idea what he had did. The Julia Wallace murder. This explainer dives into a case that unfolded in the dark, freezing, foggy streets of 1930s Liverpool. It's a case that criminologists all over the world are literally still studying nearly a century later just because of its terrifying precision. Every single piece of evidence we're going to look at reads like a perfectly constructed, completely sinister puzzle. So exactly 24 hours after getting that strange phone call, William heads out into the bitter winter evening. And he spends 45 frustrating minutes just wandering these gas-lit streets. He's stopping confused locals, asking for directions to this business meeting, before he finally just throws his hands up and abandons the search entirely. But here's where the geography of the city tells a really terrifying story. If you look at a 1931 city map, it clearly outlines Menlove Gardens North, Menlove Gardens West, and Menlove Gardens South. Those are all real, actual streets. But the address given by this mysterious Mr. Qualtrough, he said Menlove Gardens East.
That address did not exist. It wasn't a simple mistake. Actually, it wasn't a typo either. It was a phantom location. William Wallace had been meticulously, deliberately lured away from his home. He was sent on a wild goose chase out into the freezing fog for a meeting that was never, ever going to happen. So he returns to a completely dark house. He knocks on the front door, but gets no answer. He pulls out his own key, but it refuses to turn. The mechanism is locked from the inside. Facing this confusing physical barrier, he walks around the garden to the back of the house. He tries the back door, and it opens. He steps into the pitch-black hallway. He calls out to his wife, Julia. Silence. There's no answer echoing back through the house. The only thing he can see in the dark is this single thin line of light glowing from underneath the front parlor door, and slowly, he pushes that door open. Inside the room, the fire is still burning. A chair is overturned, and Julia Wallace is lying on the floor. She had been brutally beaten to death with a blunt instrument, a weapon that, by the way, was never recovered from the scene. 11 blows to the head. It's a devastating, completely horrifying discovery that just instantly shattered the quiet life they had built together. When the police arrived just minutes later, they found themselves staring at a literal textbook locked room mystery. Now, if you're not familiar, that's a crime scene where the perpetrator could not have possibly entered or left without detection. The front door was bolted from the inside. The police checked every single window in the house. They were completely closed and intact. There was absolutely zero sign of forced entry anywhere. The logic of that physical evidence leads straight to one very chilling conclusion. Julia let her killer in. I mean, think about it. In 1931, on a freezing winter night, you don't just unbolt your door and invite a total stranger into your front parlor. The lack of forced entry, plus the complete lack of a struggle in the rest of the house, strongly points to the terrifying fact that she actually knew the person standing on her doorstep. The impossible timeline. Since detectives were completely baffled by the locked room, suspicion immediately fell directly onto the husband. Their working theory? Well, they thought William orchestrated the entire thing. They believed he made that phone call to the chess club himself to establish a fake alibi, ran home, committed the crime, and then wandered the streets pretending to be lost. But the prosecution's theory falls completely apart when you look closer. Official chess club records log that incoming call from Qualtrough at exactly 7:15 p.m. Yet, definitive calculations of the local tram routes, along with solid witness statements, prove William didn't leave his house until 7:45 p.m. It was physically impossible for him to have been at the telephone box to make that call at 7:15. But here's the crazy part. Despite the timeline being physically impossible, despite absolutely no murder weapon, and despite his calm, quiet demeanor, the police arrested William Wallace anyway.
The public pressure to close this bizarre, high-profile case was just immense, so they sent the quiet chess player straight to trial.
An unprecedented appeal. In a packed, breathless 1931 courtroom, the jury heard all this circumstantial evidence and returned a swift, devastating verdict. Guilty. William Wallace was sentenced to death.
His lawyers, though, they didn't give up. They immediately took the case to the Court of Criminal Appeal in London, and in a move that completely shocked the legal system, the court issued this ruling. Conviction overturned. Evidence insufficient to convict. Now, you might think this was a joyous moment, right? Absolute exoneration. But it wasn't. The court didn't say they knew for sure he was innocent. They just said the prosecution's case was far too weak to execute a man. So William walked free, but the reality was completely hollow. The real killer was still out there. William's life was effectively over anyway, sadly. He returned to Liverpool, living under this massive, suffocating cloud of public suspicion. People would whisper about him in the streets. He spent his remaining days entirely isolated, just playing chess alone, until he passed away from natural causes only 2 years later, in 1933. He went to his grave never knowing who murdered his wife. The prime suspect. So, if the timeline proved William couldn't have made the call, who did? Well, decades of research point to one specific man, Richard Parry. Parry was a young acquaintance who had previously worked with William. And the profile surrounding Parry is deeply, deeply unsettling. First of all, he intimately knew the Wallace family's routines and schedules. Second, in the days right after the murder, he made some highly suspicious comments to his friends. Third, and honestly this is the most damning part, he later admitted to a friend that he possessed intimate knowledge about the crime scene. We're talking details that the police had never released to the public. He was actually interviewed by investigators at the time, but he was released. He was never officially charged. And the true horror of this suspect is that the answers are permanently out of reach. Richard Parry died in 1980. Whatever he knew, whatever his actual involvement was on that night, he took those secrets to the grave with him forever. So we're left with two terrifying realities. On one hand, a perfectly constructed crime. A fake identity, a non-existent street cleverly used to clear the husband out of the house, and a locked door. And on the other hand, a killer who simply walked away into the Liverpool fog without leaving a single trace of forensic evidence behind.
The final board we're looking at is just staggering. A phone call from a man who didn't exist, an address that was never there, a locked room, and a dead wife. The perpetrator played a completely sinister game of chess, trapped their opponent, and then simply walked away, abandoning the board mid-game.
Nearly 100 years later, all the original case files, the police notes, the evidence photographs, they all lead right back to the very first domino that fell in that chess club on that winter night. One piece of the puzzle remains completely, stubbornly unsolved. Who made that call?